If you don't know who I am, I'm Linda Terhar. I'm Mayor Pro Tem in Saline, and welcome to this workshop. Thanks for coming. Brian Morrow, unfortunately, couldn't be here tonight at the last minute. A late-breaking work assignment meant that he couldn't be here tonight. So I also want to thank Terry Royal for setting up this workshop for us. And I'm happy to introduce Eleanor Seward, who is fresh to Saline after a 1-hour drive that turned out to be 2 hours unexpectedly. So she just rolled into town in fine shape. And I'm sure I've had the pleasure of attending a workshop that she did for us about maybe 4 years ago now. And I'm sure we're all in for a very informative and enjoyable session.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be here, and now that you've met me, I'd like to meet you. So if we could start around the room and tell me your name and what you do with the city of Saline and how long you've been doing it.
My name's Carl Haddop. I'm with the Saline District Library trustee. I've been doing it for about 4 years.
I'm Suzanne DeVries. I am on the Historic District Commission, and I've been doing it since August.
Huh?
I'm Linda Terhar. I've been on the City Council for 4 years.
I'm Bruce Westlake. I'm on the Environmental Commission. Been there for about 3 years.
I'm John Price. I'm on the Environmental Commission. Been doing it about 1 year.
Jim Rupp, been on the City Council 3 years.
Gary Robles, City Superintendent, Engineer, and Planning Commission liaison.
How long, Gary?
Oh, too long. 28 here, and I'm at Mountain West.
I'm Janet Dillon. I'm newly elected to Saline City Council.
Larry Reddick, Police Chief, 2.5 years.
Todd Campbell, City Manager, almost 7.
Catherine Skull, Assessor, 19 years. Planning Commission, about 3. Terry Royal, City Clerk, a little over a year.
Bill Beardsley, Planning Commission, about 4 years.
David Rhodes, Council Member, 8 years.
I'm not seriously. I'm York Township Clerk, Helen Neal.
I'm Jody Roberts, Parks and Rec Department. My commissions are Saline Youth Council and Parks Commission, and I've worked for the city for 14 years.
Connie Young, I worked for the city for 8 years, and I take minutes for the Planning Commission and Environmental Commission.
Amy Rutledge in the clerk's office, and I've been here 17 years.
Jeff Fordyce, I'm the Director of Public Works and Staff Liaison to HDC. 13 years.
Wonderful. Well, we have the brand new and the very experienced. This is a workshop, and I hope you'll ask lots and lots of questions. And it's very appropriate to have the mix, including township, because the rules are the same. Whether you're a village, a city, or a township, whether you are elected or appointed, because it's all the same effective meeting management. And it's actually, I went and did a workshop 2 weeks ago in which they had the school board, the city, the county commission, every elected person that they could possibly find. And they have a separately elected library board, which I think is different than yours, isn't it? Yeah, this is a library board that actually runs for elections. So they had all kinds of people there. But it is the same for everyone. A little bit of an introduction to parliamentary procedure. Everything I'm going to say tonight is according to Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. This is the 11th edition, which came out 2 Septembers ago. And about every 10 years, they do a new edition. And halfway through the decade, they'll contact those of us who are professional registered parliamentarians and ask what we think should be updated in the book. There were 117 changes in this edition. None of them affect local government at all. There are 2, because I know if I had asked you each to tell me what things you're active in the community, you would have given me a whole long list. And I will tell you, for that part of your life, the nonprofit, if you will, schools, church, etc., there are 2 changes that if you have to use them will be handy. And they're both clarifications. One is, and I hope you never need it, disciplinary procedures. They didn't really change it, but they outlined it much, much better, so that if you had to use a disciplinary procedure for a nonprofit, it would be much clearer what to do. And the other one I hope you don't need is they're much clearer on what to do if you take an election and it doesn't work. And again, not the kind of election we're talking about, municipal, but in the PTA or your favorite organization. So those are two changes. I actually do a workshop on the 117 changes, so if you have difficulty sleeping, invite me over. How significant is a change? Not very. I think the minutes are the best I have seen in a long time. Congratulations to you and all of the people who take minutes. Minutes are what was done, not what was said. And your minutes are what was done, not what was said. Very carefully and thoughtfully put in there. And I compliment you on what a super job you do. But I point that out right away because there is one change I would make in the minutes, and it's a change in the agenda as well. Because how much difference does a change in Roberts make? Not very much. In 1970, and we all know how long ago that was, that edition made two changes that were significant. The first one was they changed old business to unfinished business. And that would be the one thing I would say for your minutes and agendas. Go to unfinished. Why? Because it's not necessarily old. Let's say the meeting was called to order and on the agenda was a report from the chief. But the chief had been called away for something important. Even though the agenda is adopted, the mayor would say, if there's no objection, we'll hold this till later in the meeting when the chief can be here. That just went under unfinished business. So you see, it's not necessarily old. It can be something from this meeting that we're just going to delay, or something from the last meeting. The other change they made, which was also, that one they actually like you to use unfinished business rather than old. The other one was more of a suggestion, but I see that you don't have a problem with it, and that is not supposed to say respectfully submitted at the end of minutes. You don't say that anymore. You can, but they just don't suggest it. But I will tell you, not a week goes by that I don't see both old business and respectfully submitted in people's documents.
I'm asking too many questions, I'm sure.
Oh, I hope you, no, ask a lot, because it's a workshop.
How is old, so if you're in a meeting and they decide to table something, does that then become unfinished business?
Yes, it does. But now, remember, table can only be for this meeting or the next meeting. So it would go under unfinished business if you don't do it today at the next meeting. I'll talk about table for a moment because it's my least liked motion. And we're going to get to motions a little bit later on, but I will tell you why I don't like table. And I'll tell you what it's really for. It's the one motion where I can ask you as the chair, why are you making the motion to table? It's the only motion where I can ask you what your intention is, because it has a nickname. Does anybody know what the nickname of table is? The killing motion. Because if you don't take it off the table by the end of the next meeting, gone, correct? Absolutely gone. So people would do that and then never put it on the next agenda, and it would just be forgotten. And people thought that that was a good way to get rid of things. So that's why I can ask you why. What is it really meant for? And I even thought in this edition, they might even shorten the time for which you could lay something on the table. The intention is we're having our city meeting, we're discussing, we have a motion on the floor to buy new benches for the park. In comes a consultant who charges by the 15-minute intervals, somebody whom we're going to have to pay. Or in comes our U.S. congressman, somebody who also doesn't want to sit and listen while we discuss buying new benches for the park. That's what lay on the table is for. It's meant to lay a motion on the table temporarily. It's not debatable. It's not amendable. You can't talk about it. You just say, I move to lay the motion on the table. You get a second. It goes on, you get a vote on it. It's tabled. The intention is to put that motion on green benches just to the side so you can either speak to the consultant or welcome your congressman. The person leaves and somebody says, I move to take from the table the motion related to green benches. That gets seconded. Again, it's not debatable. It just, you vote on it and it's back before you. That's what tabling is really intended to do. So that's a good question. I don't like it because people use it to put something off to other meetings when they should be using postpone. And I'll explain that later on. Anyway, so this is Roberts. It's really very easy to understand. Because the gentleman who wrote it, General Henry M. Robert, was a general in the Army and an engineer. And he had a very orderly mind. And it's a very easy book. It has a lot of stuff in it that you don't need. 85% of the questions I get come from only 15% of the book. This is 15% of the book. They've done a new one called Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief. $7.50 at your favorite bookstore. And if you want to have a Roberts, has a section on most frequently asked questions. The print is larger. They explain the motions. So it's really a very handy book. And I'm going to give you the best piece of paper at all in the second half tonight when we go for the motions. But that's Robert's Rules. Is Roberts the only authority? Absolutely not. In my library, I have over 30 different parliamentary authorities. Why do I recommend Roberts? It has more stuff that goes with it. It has the in brief. It has, I don't like the name of the book, but the book's not bad, Robert's Rules for Dummies. It has just more stuff. But there are several other authorities that are popular. Did you have a question?
Not just a question, but when somebody asks a question, could you repeat it? Because I couldn't actually hear you.
Oh, okay, good idea. Thank you, thank you. Now, the second thing we need to know is, where does Roberts fit in what I'm going to call the funnel of motions? The funnel of documents would be a better expression. When we think about the things to which municipalities must pay attention, we go first to, of course, the United States Constitution. We have to adhere to that in anything that we do. And it's been interesting as I've traveled the state. Sometimes people say, well, the Constitution, U.S. Constitution is kind of far away from municipal government. But it isn't really now in Michigan with so much of the discussion of right to carry laws and other things that are bringing it right to the front door. Then there are any federal rules that may apply in your community. And again, if you have a historic area, you may have historically designated buildings or structures, areas. If you have federal housing, that may impact. So there may be federal laws that apply. Then, of course, we have the Constitution for Michigan, which applies to all of us, and any laws that may apply. And I'll talk in a moment about the two that apply the most to municipal government. Then we have our communities, depending on what kind we are. Now, in a city, of course, we have city charters. And because cities have home rule, city charters are all over the place. Townships and villages are much more uniform. So when my phone rings on Tuesday morning, because most bodies meet on Monday night, and they say, oh, it's the mayor, the city attorney, sometimes the city manager who called, but often the city clerk. And they usually begin with, you're not going to believe what happened last night. So my next question will be, what kind of a municipality are you? If the answer is village or township, I'll say, go ahead and ask the question. If it's a city, I'm going to have to say, do you have your charter at hand? Because city charters vary tremendously from city to city. I had somebody come flouncing up to me just last week to announce that she had gone to the city next door to her. She doesn't live in my city, but she lives in the city next door, and she'd gone to another city to their council meeting because it was abutting her property, and she came to tell me they were doing it all wrong. And I said, actually, probably not, because they're a city and yours is a city, and city charters vary enough that you can tell differences when you go from community to community. So know that that's the importance of home rule in Michigan. And not every state has as strong a home rule state as we do, and people in Michigan take advantage of it. But there you have your city charter. Now you have any ordinances you adopt, any rules. Now, I was impressed with how many different boards and commissions you have. Do the different boards and commissions have their own rules? Does the environmental group have its own set of operating rules? And I bet the library does. I'm sure the historical board does. Who was historic? Yes. So you have those rules. Now we come down to where do we use Roberts? See, it's all the way down there. We can adopt any rules we want that vary from Roberts and just say, when it's not covered in our own rules, then we'll use the book. So I think it's important to know where Roberts is. One thing, Roberts says, the name of the maker of the motion is in the minutes. The seconder is not. I can tell you there is not a city, village, or township in this state that doesn't have the name of the seconder in the minutes, because that's the way we do it. And so that's a perfect example of something where you don't go by Roberts for that, and yet you go by Roberts for the other things. So that's just a little sense of where Roberts is. So it's a great book, but don't give it more importance than it has. Don't ever let anybody wave the book at you and tell you that's how things go, because that's not necessarily true. Let's go to the handout. And I've talked in the beginning, of course, about the ones that I've mentioned. And if you'll go to page 2, or the backside of page 1, you'll come to the 2 that I referred to that are most important Michigan laws most frequently encountered in local government. The Open Meetings Act of 1976 is the first one. The basic intent is to require public bodies to conduct business at open meetings. The Freedom of Information Act was really promoted by newspapers. It was really the editors of newspapers who, during that time of openness, really promoted it. So I just mentioned that because do you have a local paper? Yes, you do, because I saw it on your website, because you just got that nice notice from the U of M about your business climate and how you encourage business in your community. I thought that was wonderful. But that's why there are right now more communities that are being charged with violating the Open Meetings Act than we've seen in a long time. Are more communities violating it? No. The newspapers are just so intent on seeing that, catching people, that they're really into it. Have you had that issue at all here? Wonderful. We'll keep it that way. The thing that we're finding more people are more communities getting caught on, in the definition of the Open Meetings Act of what it covers, and by the way, it's a very short document on mich.gov, and you can go and read it. It says subcommittees, specifically mentions subcommittees as a body that has to meet the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And some communities, councils, are appointing what they believe to be sub-quorum committees. In other words, if their council is 7, which is the traditional number, not everybody's number, but traditional, they're appointing a committee of 3, thinking that now they don't have to worry about the notice, the posting, and everything. But of course, they just created a subcommittee of 3, which has a quorum of 2. Exactly. So subcommittees do have to be posted, and that's been a little bit of a challenge for some communities. Do you have any questions about the Open Meetings Act? And the other place they're getting caught is technology. The reply all and forward buttons are getting some people into some difficulty, because in a council, or, and remember, any of these rules apply to any, once a council appoints a body, it's like all the things that apply to them zap through to them. So everything that applies to the council applies to every single one of the bodies that you mentioned that you are a part of. And they, what was I going to say? Oh, they are, the technology thing is that sometimes when a question is asked, in answering it, as the group is discussing it online, there is some feeling that some of that is deliberation. And the most important words in the Open Meetings Act are deliberating toward a decision. Someone said recently, they don't bother to post their, I think it was Parks and Recreation Board meetings, because after all, any decision they make has to go to the council for approval. So they were asked, well, does the debate on the issue really happen at the council? Oh no, the council always approves everything we say, and the discussion doesn't happen there. So of course, the answer is the deliberating toward a decision all took place in the Parks and Recreation meeting. So that's important. Yes?
So, I do have a question about subcommittees or whatever they are. So if I'm on one of the city committees, we make our decisions at our committee meetings of what we're going to do, but then between meetings, subgroups of the committee work on working out the details of how to do what it is we've decided to do. Are those also considered, they have to be noticed and they fall
Right,
under
because
the Open Meetings Act?
you're deliberating toward a decision.
So the distinction between what to do and how to do it is not a critical one.
No.
Okay.
No. So, I mean, you haven't had any difficulties with it, and it's, usually people don't go to the meetings anyway, so.
Well, it's true. We've never had a member of the public appear at our meetings.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but yes, you do want to be careful about that, because decision might be, let's have new, I said benches, let's have new stuff in the parks. And this committee could work out which parks will get what. Well, you see how that's deliberating toward a decision, because the park on the west side of town, the people on there want something different than the people on the east side of town, and so you need to have that public. And sometimes the whole issue of how you get votes, it is perfectly all right for any council member to call or see any other council member and say, I'm going to bring up such and such an issue this week, and I hope you'll support it. That is fine. What they can't say is, and I already talked to other council members, Fred and Joe, and they support it. The Attorney General considers that to be in the realm of polling when you go around and say it. But you can ask, but you can certainly encourage individually people to vote for it. And of course, one of the, and usually I don't mention what community is, but this community happens to be next door to you, and this community happened to get a lot of press, and that was the difficulty that Ann Arbor ran into. At the council meeting, they were in some of the council members were in a chat room, and they were talking about some of the people in the audience. They were not discussing the issue. They were talking about going back and forth. And one of them thought that what they were saying was so funny that he forwarded it to a friend. And this, nowadays people just keep the laptop or the whatever kind of computer they have open on the kitchen counter and open to things to beep and come in. And this message went in, and they opened it up, and they were laughing about it. But it turns out one of the people at the party works for the Ann Arbor News. And so it made a big issue, and as you know, one of the council members involved did not get reelected. I mean, it really hit a lot of activity. And I got called, referred the Michigan Municipal League referred them to me to ask the question, was it a violation of the Open Meetings Act? The answer was no. because they were not discussing the issues. So it was not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Violation of the public trust, probably, but certainly not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So you do have to be careful about the reply all and forward buttons.
So on the reply all, maybe a lot of other people copied that aren't city members.
Well, and you see, you have to, if one council person writes to another council person, that's fine. But as soon as they forward it to somebody else, now we're deliberating.
But do all the other people that are copied on that email, do they have to receive the email too? Let's say, for instance, what I'm thinking of is I was asked if I was going to be attending the meeting, and that's kind of junk mail for
Right, yeah. And
so
that,
I had to reply all.
in that case, I would say just reply to the person who asked you if you were going to come. But no, but you raise an interesting question, because I know, and I know your manager is very experienced, but that's always an issue that the city managers talk about, which is if a council member asks you a question, you always answer the question to all council members. So that's a kind of a thing that does have to, because then if a council member, you all get the same answer, and then if a council member wants to write back and disagree with the manager, then that's a kind of a reply all that now becomes deliberation that you have to be careful about. Perfectly all right to send out the information. It's when you start going back and forth about it that it's a problem.
So the first question only has to go to the manager. He replies to all, and then when you reply back, you have to reply to all.
No, when you reply back, don't reply to anybody but the person who sent it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, so that's the Open Meetings Act. The other one is the Freedom of Information Act. And I'm sure you have a person appointed to, is that in the clerk's office?
No, the administrative assistant, manager's office, city manager's office does that.
Okay, manages that. Well, as you know, the Freedom of Information Act is very specific, and what date, how many days you have to reply and how you reply, and they just made some changes in it. So it's which have to do with how much you can charge, and so I find it's a very useful act, easy act to use once you know the rules. Now let's go to on the top of the third page, Parliamentary Procedure Y. I have no trouble admitting that my absolute favorite group is the Wayne State Student Senate. They are wonderful to work with. And we go on, well, I almost said retreat, but about 5 years ago, the incoming president said to me, "Coco, do we have to call this a retreat? Couldn't we call it an advance? Because we don't want to go back. We want to move forward." So now every summer we go on the advance. And that's always a lot of fun and a good time. And we do parliamentary procedure, and then they immediately use it to establish their goals for the year. So it's very effective because it's used immediately. But I said to them, people say to me, "Why use parliamentary procedure? We don't need that. We just need to make motions and vote," which of course is, as you were discovering, all that it is anyway. What should I answer them? So this is a list made by the Student Senate. It's a tool that enables members to accomplish the municipality's goals. And it is a recognizable format for a meeting. It introduces motions that lead to decision-making, and it prescribes minutes that record action. Their meetings are at the time of day where they have to get them in a very efficient way, and our student newspaper always comes because they want to write that the council isn't doing anything, the Senate isn't doing anything, so they have great incentive. And one of the things that they do very well, there are 24 of them, if they're all there, and their attendance is very good, they take turns. Not all groups are as good about taking turns. They have paddles that look a lot like a ping pong paddle that have their title on them. And when they want to speak, they hold it up, and a person sitting next to the president writes down in order who wants to speak next, and the president uses that to call on them. And no one may speak again until everyone's had a turn. Their meetings are a joy to watch. I know, not this council, I know this council is very, very fine, but we have some that could take a lot of lessons from the Wayne State Student Senate. The basic objectives of parliamentary law. And if you don't remember anything else, if you can kind of get this one slide, this will help you when you're stuck and making a decision to think about whether or not what you're about to do will work. Will it accomplish the objectives for which the group is organized? Will it expedite business? Will it ensure justice and equality to all? And will it maintain order? I notice that your meetings are a very reasonable length. So there must be this kind of activity going on that people are not. Some council meetings go into the early morning, which is not useful. Because most of, and I'm going to say us, because when I was on council, every one of us had a day job. And most of us are not really that good after 10:30. I mean, the thinking kind of goes downhill because you've worked a full day. So efficient meetings are important. Rules of debate. The maker of the motion is entitled to speak first. A member may not speak his own motion against his own motion, but may vote against it. How would that happen?
Input from other council members, new information, cause you to change your mind.
New information cause you to change your mind? Absolutely. What's something else that might change the motion that you made? An amendment. Maybe you made the motion for the benches, but now somebody's amended it to insert purple before benches. I happen to be a fan of purple, but not everybody is. And now you don't want to have purple benches, but the amendment was added. Yes?
So you're saying if I made a motion to approve something, that I'm supposed to vote for it?
No. Specifically, you may vote, as it says, any way you wish, but you can't speak against it.
Tricky.
Yes, and
So I want the question out there to be resolved, so I put it out there, and if I'm pretty quiet and not speaking for it, probably people
yeah.
know that
Well, and you
I'm
could,
not going to support it.
and you could say, without saying that you're speaking against it, you could say, this issue has been around for a long time, and I thought we ought to have it out there and get resolved. Because that is, by the way, a very good reason often to have a motion.
Can you make an amendment to that motion that you did? So you can make the motion and you can amend that motion.
Yes, you can. And very often,
Other way around.
yes, and very often you might amend your own motion because you hear some discussion. Maybe you made a motion to buy those green benches, and now in the conversation, you're realizing you didn't say what the cost should be, so you might make an amendment. But remember, the amendment, well, we'll talk about amending later, but this is not a friendly amendment. We have to vote on it, yes.
Well, that was my question.
Oh.
Friendly amendment, I put that.
Yeah, well, people have used a motion once made and seconded and stated by the chair belongs to the entire body. The error that's often made is someone will go to amend that motion for the green benches and ask the maker of the motion and the seconder if it's all right with them. We don't care, because it's now everybody's motion. If the discussion is going on and we're all talking about the benches and somebody says, well, you know, the city color is green. Oh, everybody goes, oh, that's right, that's right. The chair could say, if there's no objection, we'll make that green benches. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that's a friendly amendment. I was assisting an airport authority, and it was the chair's first meeting. And there was a motion on the floor, and somebody said, I make a friendly amendment, and added a part to the motion. When the chair stated it again, one of the other members said, where did that come from? And she said, well, it was a friendly amendment. He said, I don't think it's very friendly. So it has to be something everybody likes, or else you can vote on it as an amendment. The other way, actually, that you might vote against your own motion, it was a large convention, probably about 3,000 people, and they were amending the bylaws, a revision of the bylaws. Someone came to the microphone, made a provision to put in the bylaws. It got seconded, and then the discussion happened, and the person came back to the microphone and said, point of order. I realize the motion I made isn't what I want. I want to withdraw my motion. Well, a motion's made, seconded, stated by the chair belongs to who? So the chair had to ask the body, is there any objection to the member withdrawing her motion? Well, maybe it wasn't what she meant, but people liked it. So there was huge objection to withdrawing her motion, allowing her to withdraw her motion, and the motion went on to be adopted by the required 2/3 vote. So she came to me afterwards and said to me, well, I voted against it. And I thought, well, fine. But, so that's another place where you might vote against your own motion. You wanted to withdraw it and they wouldn't let you.
Don't most bylaw changes require some advance postings, advance notice?
Good question.
Would it have been legal anyway?
That's why the Michigan Constitution hasn't been revised. Because when you do a revision, everything is up. Everything's available. This wasn't a case where the individual bylaws had been noticed, but where the entire document was put out for consideration. And when you do that in a nonprofit, it means everybody can have at it. It's a bit of a difficult thing to do. Okay, yes?
In a friendly amendment, how is that written in the, how would I write that in the minutes?
Right. The motion as adopted was at the end.
As adopted was the new motion.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I say by friendly amendment?
You can. You can. There was a friendly amendment offered to do X. The motion as adopted was. Because I noticed you do put in what the motion as amended as what, and that would be the same thing. All remarks must be limited to the merits of the subject immediately under discussion. Now, we in local government are superior in many ways, but this is something we do better than any other organization. And I do condominiums and unions and nonprofits and everything. We can start with those green benches, and in no time at all, we can be discussing something entirely different. We're really fast at that. So we'll talk later about what you say to get things back on track. But we are better at that than anybody else. All remarks must be addressed to or through the chair. That's very important. And if you want to look as a chair, as though you know what you're doing, there are two things to do. One, actually three. One, make everyone speak to you through the chair. Two, state the motion. Three, state the outcome. Doesn't take very long, and it looks like a very efficient meeting. So you want to make all remarks through the chair, state the motion, and then state the outcome. Personal comments about other individuals should be avoided. I'm sure that's not the case here, but in other communities. Well, and members are seldom referred to by name, rather by title. That, again, is an option. I recently chaired an ad hoc task force on water, sewers, and streets. It was a gem. It was a gem. Three things that really can annoy people and cost a lot of money. And but the very first meeting when I was elected chair, I took about 10 minutes and said, when should we meet? what shall we be called? And the group decided, it was an advisory group of 9, that when there were guests present, we would be called Mr. and Mrs. When they were not present, we would call each other by our first names. One of the members said he really liked roll call. And we asked the clerk who'd been appointed to advise the task force if she would call the roll. She said she'd be happy to. So we just cleared out all those things. You know, we never, ever again had to have any other procedural conversation. That took care of it all in the beginning. So whether it's with your nonprofit or with your board or commission, take the time to say, how are we going to do this? Many communities are very comfortable with calling the members by their first name. Other communities feel that they need a little bit higher level of civility. Are you on, yes, you are on TV, because you can be live streamed the next day. That sometimes makes the dividing line. How do you refer to each other at the council? Mm-hmm. Yeah, somehow that visibility. Ours is called Monday Night Live in our. But it's nice because people do watch live. And I remember I was chairing and a gentleman ran in with clearly his raincoat over his pajamas to talk about, like your community, ours is 4x4 square miles. So we could get over pretty quickly. And he wanted to talk about something. We were already on something else on the agenda, but I felt that he made the effort, so I get to comment. No member may comment adversely on any prior act of the body, and that's something that is quite common in all organizations, where there's always somebody who says, well, I didn't vote for that. You know, that was a big mistake the organization made, but I didn't vote for that. So that should not be the case. And again, rules during public debate. No person should speak a second time on a motion as long as another is requesting recognition, speak for a first time on the issue or motion. That's an awfully good rule. I don't know if you have any regulars who come to your meetings. It is a state law, so if you don't have somebody, we can get somebody appointed to come and be with you. But that helps that person wait their turn to speak again until everyone has had a chance. And remarks should be limited to 2 minutes. I believe yours is 3. Yeah, 3 is quite common. I'm a fan of 2. Try to take your watch and try to convince somebody of something. If you take more than 2 minutes, you're going to tell it to me again. That's just how long. It's hardly any.
Is that part of a legal situation, the Constitution, or anything that limits the number of minutes a body could give anybody any time they want?
Yes, the Open Meetings Act is very clear that you may set any rules which allow you for the reasonable conduct of your meetings in order to accomplish the business of your municipality.
Could the chair then allow selectively some people to speak more than 2 minutes?
No, and therein lies the problem. And there are communities where how long you can speak is directly related to how well you know the mayor. And so that's not a good thing. You know, if you're going to have that rule, then you need to make it fair, make it across the board. And most communities do. And most communities have it and kind of have it in abeyance. So, you know, 3/4 of the meetings of the year, they don't need it. But the one where they put the stoplight on the stop sign on the street, suddenly everybody's there. Our Parks and Recreation Department hardly ever had anybody come. And in fact, they used one of the rooms in the rec building and just had a big table in the center of the room because no one ever came to their meetings. Then they decided to put in a dog park. And suddenly the walls were lined with chairs and people, and they just went, help! And so we had to institute some rules that they had previously not had. So it's a good thing to have the rule, even though you don't need to use it all the time.
So could the chair, seeing all those people on his or her own or with the support of the body, say, given the crowd tonight, we normally would allow 3 minutes, but tonight we're going to allow 2 minutes?
Only if your rules say that.
Okay.
And some municipalities do have in their rules that given the size of the attendance, the mayor or council members may limit. But again, it would be, everybody would be 2 minutes. Yeah. So I think it's a good rule to have, and I think it's a good rule to let people know that you have. And remember, one of the characteristics of public bodies is that the people who come, for the most part, have not been there before. You have your regulars, and then you have the people who come for a particular issue. So it's worth the time to just take a moment at the beginning of the meeting and say, thank you so much for coming tonight. As you know, we take turns, no one speaks again until everyone has spoken, and each person may have 3 minutes. That doesn't take any time at all. Yes?
So it sounds like they can speak more than 3 minutes if they're allowed to come back again. So,
And thank you, because that brings me to the next part. What you cannot do is say, we will take public comment for only 1 hour. So you can limit the time an individual may speak, but you cannot limit the time allowed for public comment. And as you know, because I saw it on your agendas and in your minutes, you must allow public comment at every meeting. If it's a study session, you can have it whenever you want. If it's a study session, you can have it at the end, but you must allow public comment.
What I just gathered from his comment was that if there was nobody other than me as a public commenter, that I could speak for 3 minutes, and then I could ask for another 3 minutes, and I could keep going.
Well, I think at the point at which the chair would find that your time was not being well used, the chair might say, I think we've heard all of your comments. But the answer is yes. Yes. And just as you cannot limit comment by where people live. You know, I served with a council member who wanted when a person came to the microphone to speak, he wanted the clerk to look up and see if they'd voted in any of the 5 most recent local elections. And if they had not, they would have to sit down. Of course, completely against the law, but you can understand the incentive there. The fact is, it doesn't matter where the person lives or whether they're a citizen of your community. Everyone is entitled to speak.
I don't understand what Bill just said. If he was in the audience and he was the only person here, come up and speak for 3 minutes, then ask for 3 more, right then.
Assuming nobody else wanted to speak. He's just assuming he's the only person at the meeting who wants to talk. So he wants to claim his 3 minutes more than once.
Why could you do that if there were 3 people in the room, or is it just something for 1 person in the room? I don't know.
Anyone. Any person who wanted to speak again,
Yeah.
after everyone else had spoken, could have another turn.
Okay. Thank you. Wow.
You think we won't tell people that one? I should comment, one of the things that you do very well is, not every community remembers that on the consent agenda, it's not just the members of the board or council who can pull things off, it's the public too. And you do ask the public as well. You know, then that's appropriate, that's the way it's supposed to be. But many communities ask only the council members, forgetting that some of the people who came because they saw something on the agenda and they would like it pulled off and discussed. Of course, they can't do anything about it except request that it be pulled off. They can't make any motions. Which is why, back to minutes, why I so, again, congratulate you on your minutes. I was doing a workshop for a whole room full of clerks up in mid-Michigan, and asked them the question, what they're putting in their minutes under public comment. And everyone has narrowed it down tremendously, but I thought one clerk who said, she just writes down 13 people spoke. She doesn't put down anything more than that unless there's an assignment. And she gave the example, she said, for example, if a citizen got up and said there was a huge pothole in front of her house, and the mayor said, would the head of DPW please go have a look at that, and they had the citizen's address, that would go in. But unless there was an assignment, nothing would go in. And they related that they had come to this only recently, that they used to sometimes try to summarize what people said, but they always got it wrong. And of course, the fact is, the public can't correct the minutes. So if you put down what you think they said, that's not really fair to them, because they have no way to say, that's not what I said. And they found that also trying to put down who spoke for and who spoke against is often also very difficult, as those of us know. Sometimes that's why when in a large convention I have green signs and red signs, because sometimes I can't tell whether the person is speaking for or against an issue. So they really have come down to, and I noticed you've narrowed down the name and just what the topic was. And I think that that's a good one too. Under those others present, are those the citizens?
Those are people who sign in. Not, I don't know everybody because I've only been here for a little over a year. So if you don't sign in, or if you sign in and I can't read it, you're not included.
And that's unusual.
Is it?
Yeah, not wrong, just unusual. Because not a lot of communities use sign-ins. That came to us from school boards. School boards use sign-in sheets. And some communities do, but not many anymore. And
They do.
yes,
You can put a list on file. See that?
you certainly could, but you can also just throw the list away after the meeting.
So you don't have to file this. I keep them.
So if you didn't have a sign-in, then you don't have to account for others present.
Absolutely not. As you can imagine, in Detroit, when we have a public hearing, we might have 200 or 300 people. The only ones who sign in are the ones who wish to speak. And they take a card, fill it out, and there's a designated clerk at a desk towards the audience who takes the cards so that they can go up front to speak. But if you don't wish to speak, nothing at all. And that's mostly common. And many communities don't have any sign-in at all, even if you wish to speak. If you'd like to see a really lively discussion, ask a group of municipal attorneys if you have to say who you are when you speak. Because there's a strong group that thinks the answer is no. It says meeting is open to the public. It says that a person may speak no matter where they're from. That there's absolutely no reason to know where they are. And many communities that are live have dropped asking where people live because they've had some break-ins and some difficulties with people saying, and again, this is when they're live, so they won't even say where people live. But I can recall on the hearing on the baseball stadium, the new Tiger Stadium in Detroit, a member going up to the clerk and saying, when she said, your name please, and he said John Doe. And she said, well, you'll be John Doe too, because there's already another one. And that's the designation. And when the name was called, indeed that person went up. So, but as I say, if you'd like to have a lively conversation, look at the Open Meetings Act and see whether it actually says you have to say who you are. I've never, other than those experiences, I've never had anybody say they wouldn't say who they were, but please state your name for the record is a common thing to say. And people do, and people say who they are. Do you have another question?
I just wondered if that's just reserved for public hearings. Does that have to, it doesn't even have to be there either. Okay. Especially if the address is not correct.
Right. So, and as I say, that what you're doing is not incorrect, but I thought I would mention that it's a bit unusual. And it's fine if you can't read their names. You're actually improving handwriting one person at a time. And see, and I actually said that. The speaker may be asked but not required to state name and any other requested identifying information. So you can take that up. Remarks must be confined to the pending question. Speakers should address the chair and not enter into debate with other members of the audience. And during debate, the chair shall make an effort to alternate between supporting and opposing arguments. And I just use that if I have a lot of people who want to speak. I'll say, well, the 3 people who've spoken are all in favor. Or there's someone who would like to speak who's opposed to the action that's being proposed. And then later on, I may say, now perhaps people could only speak if they have something new to add, which is kind of a useless thing for me to say because, of course, everybody thinks that they have something new to add. And I learned early on, I very unwisely let a member of a homeowners say that he was speaking on behalf of 2 other homeowners, so he would like 6 minutes. And I very unwisely thought, well, now that seems reasonable. Of course it didn't, because first of all, he spoke for 6 minutes, and then they said, well, Fred, I didn't tell you that I agreed with the part about, and Fred, you left out the part about, so I only did that one time. Rights and debate are not transferable. We can't believe what we see on the Republican and Democratic conventions. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and work on motions. So keep thinking about your questions, meetings that you go to. Where do the bumps come? What's happening when the bumps come? So let's take a 10-minute break. By the National Association of Parliamentarians. There really is a National Association of Parliamentarians, and there's a Michigan Association of Parliamentarians, and then we have our local units. So it's structured just like practically every kind of organization that there is. And the National Association of Parliamentarians has the responsibility for the credentialing of parliamentarians. So very often after I do this, somebody will say, I'm really interested in this. If you are, go to their website. On the membership area, you can click on, for free, the basic membership test. And the basic membership test prints out, it's 300 questions, and the answer sheet comes with it, all mix and match or true and false, nothing written, nothing essay. And the membership exam is 100 of those 300 questions. So every year, I teach a group for it, and groups take it and become parliamentarians. And then the next level test is all multiple choice, and that is an ongoing thing. We laugh, I coach that group every month, first Tuesday of the month, for a whole morning at one of the area libraries, and people come from all different units, because there are 7 units in Michigan, come from all different places to take it, and you just keep going until finally one day you say, all right, I'm going to do it, and then you proctor the exam. So that's it. Now, I'm a professional registered parliamentarian. There are about 250 of us in the United States. So it's not a big area. So if it's something that you're interested in, let me tell you, there's plenty of business, plenty of people who would like to be trained, plenty of people who have lots of arguments, and if you've got good, strong shoulders, the political parties, conventions, etc., are always in need of doing it. But then it's very, very interesting. It's just, and if you've been in municipal government, you'll know what it's like, so it won't be too hard. It's people who have been in government who go, oh, I can't believe people act like this. Of course they do. And of course, if you've been in political, local government and in the university, you can really believe people act like this. Anyhow, let's start in the back, because I want to give you, this is beyond a municipal meeting, but I want to give you an idea of, for all of the other organizations, what happens in a typical meeting. And the nice thing about this page is everything you need to say as the chair is on this page. After determining that a quorum is present, the presiding officer rises, waits, or signals for quiet and says, the meeting will come to order. A gavel is used twice in a meeting. This is one of the times. The meeting will come to order. Quorum. Number needed to transact business in the bylaws of your organization. If If it's a board of directors, it's probably a majority. That's the most common for a board of directors. If it's an organization, it's usually a percentage or a general number. Robert describes it as the number reasonably expected to appear at any given meeting. So that's how you would set your quorum. In the city of Saline, for the commission, for the council, does the number needed for a quorum also, is it the number, minimum number of something to be adopted?
I think so.
Okay. That is a home rule issue. That varies from community to community. If we moved south to Ohio, it's a state law. That would be true for all of us. But in our community, the minimum number required for a quorum, which is 4 of 7, is also the minimum number required for something to be adopted. So you might hear at the council or at planning board, the chairs say to a petitioner, there are only 4 members of planning board here tonight. You will need all 4 votes. Do you wish to proceed, or would you like to reschedule? So that's just letting people know that that's. So as I say, that by the way, that was one of the things that the person told me was wrong about the city she went to. But in her community, it's the number of those present and voting that something's adopted. And there was 4 council members present in this other community. 1 was abstaining, 3 voted, and it was 2 to 1. And the mayor said, that's adopted. And in that community, that is true. Yes?
Well, your action items involve a public hearing. You can't just not have a public hearing because you noticed for that date.
No, you couldn't for a public hearing. You'd have to have it anyway. And if it wasn't adopted, you could have another one. Because remember, if something isn't adopted, it doesn't mean it's necessarily gone. It means we have a chance to do it again if we wish. Yes?
In that case, is it tabled or postponed, or what happens?
No, it's interesting because it's a word that is not used particularly, but it is used in Roberts, and it is called renew. When a motion has been made and is not adopted, and time passes, substantially the same motion may be made again. And I think that the most common in municipal government, the thing we see most commonly is the current council does not take action on something. Somebody runs for election and says, if you elect me, I'll see that you get that park. And so a motion that has failed prior to the election, now we have the election and now the motion is made again to have the park and it's adopted. It can be as simple as in a nonprofit. You have an idea of something you'd like to do, but your friends aren't there today to vote for it, so it fails. You can simply make the motion the next meeting when your friends are there. Or it could be that you debated an issue and now you see that if you had changed just one thing in the motion, it probably would have been adopted. So at the next meeting, you could make this substantially the same motion again, but with the change that would make it more powerful. And it's simply, you don't say I'm going to renew it, you just make the motion over again. This is assuming it failed. As I say, it's not discussed a lot, but if people do ask me, they want to somehow reconsider it or bring it back again or do something. If it fails, you just start over. So we have a quorum. The meeting has come to order. Based on the group, religious, patriotic, and customary rituals may be included. If given, the invocation, the national anthem, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States are arranged in that order. Inspirational messages follow patriotic exercises. That's just, you can kind of hang on to that. That's just a good thing if you're arranging a meeting. That's the order in which the things go. Roll call if customary. The secretary will call the roll of the members. Calling the roll at MML, I asked the group that was there, that came to the workshop in Marquette, how many of them call, and of course it's mixed or villages and cities, how many of them call the roll when it's money? And there were some hands that went up. How many call the roll when it's 2/3? How many call the roll when they deem it to be an issue of importance, particularly important? And then I asked, how many of you call the roll all the time? And some put their hands up, and this one fellow looked around and he said, "You mean we don't have to?" And the answer is, of course, you need to find out how people voted. And if you can see how people voted without calling the roll, you certainly can. Calling the roll is not required in any way. Only the need is to know how people voted. Communities may establish their own rules about calling the roll, but there is no statutory requirement. You call the roll all the time?
No, no, but about money and transferring money from one fund to another.
That's very common. That's very common. Yes.
Well, was a time when they had little buttons up there, and then when there's red and green lights on the board. That was fun.
And that's, of course, what you see in Lansing.
Like this, yeah.
Then reading and approval of minutes, and of course hardly anybody reads the minutes anymore. They mostly, for nonprofits, they come to us electronically, and at the meeting somebody asks if there are any corrections. For councils, I really recommend that someone is reading the minutes. Some councils actually give it an assignment, by the month. This council member agrees to be sure to read them. Some councils have people who do read them all the time. I served with an English professor who not only read them, he read, penciled them, and gave them to the clerk. And she appreciated it because he never made any comments, he never made any substantive changes. He just corrected them. Our budget always won awards. It was really well done. And then, are there any corrections to the minutes? You might hear sometimes people say corrections or additions, but of course a correction is an addition. An addition is a correction. If there are no, the minutes are approved as read, written. With any corrections, the secretary will make the corrections. If there are no further corrections, the minutes are approved as corrected. I approve very much of the fact that in municipal government, you actually vote on the minutes, and I think that that's very important. I think it should be an assumed motion. I think you should actually vote, because they're so important. But this is a nonprofit. The reports of the officers, board, standing, and special committees called on only if they have reports to make, which I think in nonprofits is really important, as opposed to the no report, no report, no report. Treasurer's report is never adopted. Instead, a financial review or auditor's report is adopted annually. And that may be to those of you who are in small nonprofits. I don't know if the term financial review is common to you. Many small organizations found that it was just too expensive to have an audit. So they, and with people's increasing skills in the numbers business, they have pretty much gone to appointing 2, sometimes 3 members who will do an annual review, a financial review, and ensure that the documents are being kept. Certainly if you have an organization that has less than $15,000 a year, a financial review is all that is adequate. Any questions about that? If you're invited to be the treasurer of a nonprofit, you should never say yes unless the books are audited or a financial review is done before you take them for a minute. Because you want to be sure, and I'm not suggesting that the person before you was dishonest, but there are a lot of people keeping the books for small organizations who really have no skills in that area. And you might take on something that was just a mess. Not dishonest, just a mess. If an officer's report contains a recommendation, another member can make a main motion following the report to adopt the recommendation, and committee chairmen may make motions for recommendations contained in their reports. And I've been interested to see, we're looking at a new format for reports. And I have not seen it in municipal government, but I'm seeing it a lot in the nonprofit sector, and that is, the recommendation is at the beginning. It's printed up top, and then the report comes. So that the people are telling me they're looking at the recommendation, if they know what it is and they agree with it, they don't read the report. Good or bad, I don't know, but you can see the time-saving issue there. Special orders, now you've never seen those words on an agenda. Those are the things that happen once in a while, once a year usually, only announced if they're required. So maybe this is the month we vote on the bylaws. Maybe this is the month we vote on the nominating committee. Maybe this is the month we vote on elections. Those would be the special orders. Unfinished business and general orders, new business, announcements, program, and adjournment. And again, I recommend in municipal government that we vote to adjourn. Since once we've adjourned, we're finished. So that's an example of a typical meeting. Note, I'm emphasizing the word typical. You can move things around any way that you like. I'm working with a state-level organization, a nonprofit, that meets 3 times a year for the weekend. And they really felt their organization wasn't going anywhere. And when we assessed, we did a meeting minute assessment. That means you take the meeting, and then you go back and you say, how many minutes were spent on finance? How many minutes were spent on program? How many minutes were spent? And we discovered that they were spending all their time on reports. So now, their agenda says, opening ceremonies, roll call, reading approval of the minutes, treasurer's report, president's report, new business. They move new business up to the start of the meeting. The organization has just gone wildfire. And now all reports are due 5 days before the meeting electronically, and you will only speak when the president says, do you have something to add to your report, or do you have a motion to make a recommendation? And the organization that's been about 2 years now, and the difference in attendance and membership has just been terrific. So don't be afraid for your nonprofits to put all the monkeys in the can and shake them up tight and start over again, because you may not be doing it in a way that is really effective. And as I say, there's typical, stress that. Okay, now, main motion. Mostly what we do is main motion. That's what I mostly saw in your minutes. And on the front, we have the procedure for handling a main motion. And I'm going to ask you to make a motion, so be thinking that we can play with it. So, first the president rises or asks for the floor, whether you raise your hand or however you do it. And the person gets recognized and says, then the member says the motion. I move that, or I move to. You do hear people say, I motion. And that's okay. It's not correct, good enough, but it's close enough. I motion that. And then after we have I move that, what happens next? What do I need? What are the words you commonly hear?
For discussion.
For discussion or
That's
support?
what a second is for.
Or support. Support is not wrong, but it conveys something that's not true. Which it conveys that you have to be in favor of it. And you may not at all. Now, we already said the maker of the motion can't speak against his motion, but can vote against it. The seconder has no limitations of any kind. And that's why you'll often hear somebody say, I seconded it for purposes of discussion. And that's just what they're doing. Because if 2 people don't want to talk about it, what happens? Not even dead. No motion. Didn't even have the courtesy to have life. For lack of a motion, for lack of a second, there is no motion. Doesn't go in the minutes. Next item on the agenda is. So don't second things if you don't think that it's something you want to spend time doing it, discussing it. Sometimes people think, well, I don't want to leave George hanging out there without a second. Well, no, but when George's motion loses 1-6, I mean, is that nicer? No, you wasted all that time talking about it. So if there's no second, there is no motion. And then, very important, the chair states the motion. It has moved and seconded that or two. That is a very key statement, because before I say the motion as chair, the maker can change the motion. The seconder can withdraw the second. Before I state it and give it to everybody, it still belongs to the maker and the seconder. Once I state the motion, now it's everybody's. Yes?
So in our agenda, we typically have the motions already spelled out, and you get to choose, what words you want to put in them. So is it acceptable for somebody to shortcut to, or does the chair have to read, does the maker have to read the entire motion as written, and the chair repeat that entire motion as stated?
Well, yes, in the case that you have the option, I saw that you fill in the blanks, you have the option to do it, which, by the way, is not uncommon. More and more cities are working on prepared motions because they feel that especially if it has something to do with something where somebody might sue them, it's better to have them well worked out in advance. But you certainly, that is a suggested motion. So you could say something, same topic, perhaps, but entirely different.
But it would be okay to say, I make the motion as reflected in the agenda?
Well, certainly the maker of the motion ought to state the motion.
Okay.
And then the chair could say, the motion has been, motion 1214 has been made, and refer to it that way. But the problem is that you now live, and not everybody has. I know you could bring up the agenda on your website, but not everybody does that. So as recently as Tuesday night at a public meeting, the chair was not, he's the vice chair, and not as accustomed to chairing the meetings, and he was not saying the motions, and somebody chided him and said, people watching don't have the document. You have to say the motion. So someplace in there, someone has to say the whole motion for your viewing public.
So if there's a motion made and it's seconded, and the chair does not do that, and discussion goes on and on and on and on, and all of a sudden, one of the motion maker or the seconder wants to then stop it since he didn't read it, or she didn't read it, then could we cancel it on those two still, because it doesn't belong to the whole council?
No, I think there you kind of look at what's reasonable. And you went ahead. It's the same thing as if a motion is made and somebody forgets to ask for a second and it's debated for a while, you don't have to worry about the fact that it wasn't seconded. The very first person who spoke about it effectively seconded it. So I would say that's the same thing. They went ahead. Do chairs always remember to state the motion? No. But for clarity, they should. I think, that's the point at which sensible behavior has to come in. Then we consider the motion, we debate it. Is there discussion and amendment? And I always recommend saying that, because I think a lot of people don't realize that discussion includes amendment. So, is there discussion and amendment? And then after further debate, are you ready for the question? And then this says how to take the vote. The question is on the adoption of the motion that. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion is adopted, and if it's adopted, you say what's going to happen. If it's not adopted, you don't have to say what's not going to happen. That's how you take the vote. The same meeting where the new person took the friendly amendment, she said, those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. Sometimes you hear that, and the same person who said it wasn't a friendly amendment said, I'm not voting aye, I'm voting no. And that's what you're supposed to do. So now, did somebody think of a motion? Maybe a bias.
A motion to approve request for a building
Sign.
sign.
I move to approve the request for a building sign. It's a good motion. And now, the chair may ask, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the request for a building sign. Does the maker of the motion wish to speak to the motion? That's how it starts out.
Then I could say, I think this is a good idea because of that one.
That's exactly. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I want to know how much the sign's going to cost.
Very good, very good. Now let's go inside. And look at page 2. You see where main motion is on the bottom? And look at the chart. Did it require a second? Was it debatable? Was it amendable? What kind of vote? And can it be reconsidered? Does it have an R there? Now, right next to this, in this little box, types of amendments. So skip up over postpone indefinitely and go to amend. And look at the kinds of amendments. To insert or add at the end, to strike out and insert. So a sensible fiscal person is going to say, I move to amend by adding at a cost not to exceed,
I think you're only $75.
okay, at a cost not to exceed $75. So that's a very good amendment. By the way, it's a popular amendment too, at a cost not to exceed. Let's look at amend. Does it require a second? Is it debatable? It can be amended once, requires a majority vote, and it can be reconsidered.
So I could counter and say, no, I think 500 is.
Well, you hang on a thought, hang on to that thought a minute, because we need to get it a second. Is there a second to the amendment to add at a cost not to exceed $75? Moved and seconded to amend by adding at a cost not to exceed $75. The maker of the motion will have an opportunity to speak to it.
I'm not familiar, so I can't.
Oh, we pretend. So we pretend we debated, and now it's adding at a cost not to exceed $75, and you are thinking, not enough. So you can amend that amendment, as long as the amendment you're going to make is germane, so, which means it pertains immediately to the dollar amount. So you could not say, if you said, I move to amend by adding and buy it from Fred's sign shop, I have to say, hold that thought. But you could say, I move to amend by striking 75 and inserting 500.
She has that privilege because she made the motion. Anybody can make this second amendment to change the dollar amount.
As long as I don't end up speaking against the sign.
Well, but you could, because, see, but now, if you wanted to, now that it's costing, if your motion passes and you hadn't made the amendment, but somebody else did, and now the sign that you were thinking was going to be very inexpensive is expensive, you could say, well, I know I made the motion to buy the sign, but now that it's $500, I'm no longer in favor of it. So that would be a way you could vote against, but in this case, you are making the amendment. So move to amend the amendment by striking 75 and inserting 500. That also requires a second. And then you could, I would state it, you could speak to it. Now, amending the amendment. You know, it's for playtime. It's not, it's so difficult for people to understand what you're doing. Unless, you know, when people do things like that, they hire me to chair. So, because sometimes it just gets too complicated. Although having said that, just last night, a meeting, and I don't want you to think I go to meetings all the time. This is a very, very busy season for me to have a lot of meetings. A bylaws committee reported, noticed, somebody asked about notice of bylaw amendments. Yes, noticed the bylaw amendments. All went out to all the membership, and then they looked at it, they had made an error and excluded a category of people by the way that they struck out a portion of the bylaw. So they had to make an amendment to their bylaw amendment. So we carefully wrote the script for the president and the bylaws chair, and then just waited to see how people would react. I think they trust the bylaws chair and the president, so nobody spoke to it, and they voted yes on the amendment to the amendment and the amendment. But I think if you singled out and went around the room and said to people, what just happened? I think they would have gone. But we're going to finish this off. So pretend we had debate, and we always go backwards. All those in favor of striking 75 and inserting, you can vote any way you want, just vote. Striking 500 and striking 75 and inserting 500, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
The chair is in doubt. On the next page, help with me for a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth thing down. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Division of the assembly. Do you see division of the assembly? What does it have after it?
I interrupt.
I means interrupt. So, for the moment, let's pretend we have 1,000 more people with us, but the vote was as inconclusive as it just was. And you can stand up at your seat and just yell the word question. One person. This is always fun to see at a large convention. I did one in Phoenix last year where they sat by states. And this was California, and this was New York. And they took the vote, and I agreed with the chair that I thought that the vote was yes. But the fact was that the California delegation had voted no. And you heard how much louder no is than yes? So I understood why they called for division. So that means on the call of one person, we have to take the vote over again standing. Now that has a very interesting effect. Because for one thing, when you take a vote by standing, everybody votes. On a voice vote, not everybody votes. The other thing is, within the caucuses, some of them hadn't gotten the word out on how they were supposed to vote. And there's no obligation to vote the same way. So when they voted again, clearly the vote was no. So was that done strategically, or was that legitimate? I don't know, but it's interesting to see. So that, on the call of one person, you can have the vote taken over again. In this particular case, the chair said, the chair is in doubt, and I can then call for the vote to be taken over.
And you just say question, or do you say division of the assembly?
Well, you can, depending on the kind of group you're in, mostly people just stand up and either yell division or yell question. But it's so clear, but you have to do it right away. Because if I've started on the next piece of business, too late. So you can't later go out and say, boy, I wish you'd taken that vote over again. You could wish it. So this time, yes.
In the case of this division, when you call for people to stand if they are in support, do you then assume that everyone who is not standing is on the no side? Or
No,
do you
I'm going to
then
ask
also
for,
call
I'm going to take
them?
both.
Because not everybody still has to vote.
You're quite correct. You're quite correct. And if last evening we had one that was a 2/3 vote that was a little bit close, and I'm not a member of the organization, which is a good thing. In many cases, people want somebody who doesn't belong to their organization. And so I said to the president, I request, because a parliamentarian only advises, never rules, I request that we take a standing vote. Because I really could see that it was adopted, but I knew that the people who were opposed to it were later going to say, that didn't get it. So I'd say, not a big group, 115 maybe, based on the final outcome. So we had a teller for each side. All those in favor, please rise. And on each side, the teller helps the people count themselves. You don't do 1, 2, 3. You say you're standing, you say your number, you sit. 1, 2, 3. It's very fast, it's very effective. And then the teller who watches this side comes and tells me the vote. The teller who watches this side tells me the vote. And the nice thing is that now, once everybody's voted, everybody's sitting down. So you can see when they're finished. When I do this in conventions of 2,000 or 3,000 people, it's really interesting to watch how the room settles down very quickly. And then in that case, I would use a head teller who would collect the numbers. As soon as everybody's seated, the chair can say, those opposed, please rise. Please take the vote. So the motion last night was adopted easily by 2/3, but now people can't complain. And of course, once it's taken and counted, it has to be in the minutes.
So then abstain.
Oh, abstain. I didn't mention abstain, did I? Why would that be? Robert says you cannot ask for abstentions. All those in favor, all those opposed, all those who don't have a clue. It's up to an individual to say that they abstain, if they wish to abstain. Or else, in a body like the one last night, you could just remain seated. Because that's a non-profit membership club, and you just don't vote. For us, we have to vote. And if we choose not to vote, we have to say why we're not going to vote.
And
Yes.
does that have to be memorialized in the minutes?
Yes, and you should want it in the minutes. You should, and in a nonprofit, if you're going to abstain for a reason, you should ask. I would like it entered in the minutes that I'm abstaining because I have an interest, a financial interest in the company. Just as for you on whether you're on a board or the council, when you're going to abstain, you want to abstain and have the clerk enter it on the reason on the records. Because you want it to be clear that later, I get more complaints from council members about other council members who don't abstain when they should. And they really resent that. And what can they do about it? And the answer is they can say something privately to the individual, or if they feel like it's going on too much, they can say something publicly in the meeting. This is an interesting issue for home rule because, of course, state law says we have to vote. We're elected to vote, we have to vote. That's not an issue. The only reason we don't vote is by what? When can we abstain in local government when we're elected?
We have some financial interest in the matter being considered.
Conflict of interest that is financial. But a community very near had somebody who always voted on issues which the rest of the council felt he had a financial interest in and should not have been voted. So actually in their charter, it now says that a member must abstain when the majority of the council votes in favor of that person abstaining. Then there's a community to the north of me where they had somebody who abstained on all the hot issues. If it was a hot issue, you could count on the fact that this person was going to abstain. Their charter says that a council member may not abstain except by majority vote of the council. So it's interesting, but most everybody is just silent on it, going with the state law, which says you can abstain if it's a financial conflict of interest. But you do want to announce it. Now, in Michigan, it is not the rule that you have to announce it immediately, but I recommend that to people. In Massachusetts, for example, you have to say it right away, and you cannot comment on the issue for which you're going to abstain. Sometimes,
So if it's not written, you can't abstain for non-financial reasons? So what if the person does?
vote.
And they just say, I abstain, or they don't vote then?
Well, they have to vote.
They're abstaining.
But if they abstain, they have to say why.
If they abstain, they have to say why, but the fact is, you can't abstain except for financial reasons. What can happen to you if you abstain and it's not for financial reasons?
I guess that's my question.
Yes, you could be sued. The state could come after you. It's the same as violating the Open Meetings Act. We did have somebody 2 years ago who was on a state-appointed committee, state legislative appointed committee, who refused to vote on an issue, and indeed they did prosecute.
That
He
goes
said
back to the person, right? That goes back to the person, right? Not to the
Yes.
clerk.
Yeah, right. He said he didn't feel comfortable. Did you know?
If they have an interest in the action item, don't they have to step down? And also, are they not allowed to log in the discussion of it?
You know, that, as I say, that varies. Sometimes, generally speaking, what people do, as soon as the mayor says the next item on the agenda is the purchase of new stationery, the person's hand goes right up and says, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to abstain on this because I have a financial interest in the company supplying the paper. And the clerk writes it in the minutes, and the person just is quiet. Sometimes, by the way, the word recuse, which some of the attorneys use, means exactly the same thing as abstain. It's the same word. Sometimes people feel that they should leave the room. And I have seen this most often when our judges come and ask for funds for the courts. Very often attorneys who appear before those judges will recuse themselves and actually leave the room. It's not required. So that's an option. But most of the people just sit quiet.
But if they have to vote, how does that work in that circumstance? Or using your same circumstance where the son-in-law or he owns financial, what if it's his son? And because it's his son, he doesn't want to show favoritism to his son, so he says, I want to abstain from this vote, even though it doesn't financially impact him at all.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting one. And the Attorney General has said that the person then should not abstain.
So they still have to vote.
They still have to vote. But I had a call from a city manager who had a council member on the line, and the vote was going to be on the agenda for the meeting that to increase the pension of the retirees. And her brother-in-law was the retired police chief. And her contention was yours. She said, the jerk never gave me a dime, and he probably never will. I think I should be able to vote on this because there's no financial.
Shouldn't have been talking about a police chief.
That's the police, but he was retired.
Okay.
So, what should she do? So, the answer we came to was, she should make it clear, disclose, as they say, always disclose. I want to be clear that my brother-in-law is the retired police chief. He will benefit from this, from a positive vote on the pension, but I am revealing the fact that I do not expect any financial benefit from it, and therefore I'm going to vote.
Is that a reasonable expectation, or are we talking about? I mean, let's say you had a choice on whether you would gain from something.
Well, if you have a choice, then I would say disclosing is the best thing. You know, when you disclose things, you always come out a winner in the end. We had an elected library member in the community who was renting, and the owner decided to sell the building. And he was temporarily displaced and went to stay with a friend in a neighboring community. He decided to keep it a secret. And of course, secrets get found out. Secrets love the front page of the newspaper. And he said to me, what should I have done? I said, you know, Michigan law is intent to live within the jurisdiction. You just had to say at a public library board meeting, this is what happened, and I am actively seeking housing back in the city. And in fact, anybody here could, if you know of any place, let me know. That would have taken care of what the issue was. It was a secret. So disclosing really counts. So if I wasn't sure, I would disclose. I had a basketball hoop on a front yard, on my driveway. Our planning director decided to rule that as a front structure. All basketball courts in town became front structures, and were therefore not allowable. And of course, I mean, this happened between meetings, and I had a nice picture in front of my house with the basketball court there. And the question was, what was I going to do? And I disclosed it at the meeting. I said, I have a basketball pole in my front yard, and I do not consider that content, and I'm going to vote. That was also early in the first time I was on council, and they called my house and got an interview with my husband about what he thought about the city's actions. That was his last interview. But I interrupted myself to tell you about division of the assembly. But here I'm going to take the vote again. All those in favor of striking 75 and inserting 500, I'm going to not make you stand up. I'll do raise your hands. Those opposed, raise your hands. The ayes have it, and the amendment has been amended to purchase a sign at a cost not to exceed $500. Now we have to vote on the amendment at a cost not to exceed $500, because we changed the number, but we still didn't adopt that amendment. And I would ask for debate, we could have. All those in favor of the amendment to add at a cost not to exceed $500, say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted, and the motion is before you as amended to buy a sign at a cost not to exceed $500. And then I would go back to the person who wanted to buy it from Fred's Sign Shop and say, now it is appropriate for you to say that. Or if somebody had said they wanted to make sure it had a certain design, now we could do it. So we could still amend the motion in several other ways.
What happened if that 500 would have voted down?
Then we would have voted on 75, because the 75 would have remained.
Just go back.
And we just would have voted on, if the noes have it, and the amendment is defeated, and the motion is before you to add at a cost not to exceed $75. So you just always keep going backwards, each step. So as I say, it's one of those things, now you know how to do it. So, at your own risk. You know, what's it say on TV, don't do this at home. But you can practice it. As I said, you just have to go onto the National Association of Parliamentarians site and print out that membership exam, and we can all study together. Now, let's assume we now have the motion on the floor to buy a sign at a cost not to exceed $500. And we're talking about it. Talking. Right above amend is what I think is one of the most helpful motions that we have. And that's commit or refer. So we have the live motion on the floor. We don't really know where to go with it. We want to send it to one of those committees that you mentioned, to ask for a design, to ask for something else to happen. this is a perfect time to say, I move to refer the sign motion to a committee of 3 appointed by the mayor to make recommendations as to its appearance and report at the next board meeting. So that's a motion to commit or refer. So in it, it should contain where it should go, if it's a newly appointed group, how many people it should have, and most importantly, when it should report back. So I move to refer that to a committee of 3 appointed by the chair to report back at the next meeting. And there you see your grid. I'm going to need a second. It's debatable, amendable, and requires a majority vote. Let's assume we do all that, and the sign motion is now gone. Gone to that committee of 3. Make a recommendation at the next meeting. It should automatically be placed on the agenda in the next meeting. Now, where on the agenda do you put things? Well, that varies. You can put it under, if it was a part of Parks and Rec, you could put it under theirs. If it doesn't have a spot, you can put it under unfinished business. And when it comes time, the chair would say, you have before you the motion to buy a sign at a cost not to exceed $500 and the report of the committee of 3. May we hear the report? Then following the report, the committee of 3 has said, let's just say that they didn't like it. And they have recommended no sign.
That's not possible.
And so the motion is before you, and they have recommended no sign. The body receiving the motion back can do anything they want with it. They could defeat it, they could adopt it, they can amend it again to what they want. They can send it back to the committee and say, we wanted the sign, come back with a recommendation. They can discharge that committee and appoint a different committee and refer it to that committee. So it's back before you to do whatever you want. So that's why I think that commit or refer and its friend right above it, postpone to a certain time, are 2 motions that really deserve a lot of attention. And postpone to a certain time is what I like instead of lay on the table. Because as you see lay on the table, which is right at the top of this little group, it's not debatable or amendable. So if I have reasons why I'm laying it on the table, I'm laying the sign thing on the table because I want to know about product. I want to know about color. You can't say those things and make your requests if you lay it on the table. But if you postpone it to a certain time, you can. And let's say that we're having this meeting and budget hearings are next month. That would be a perfect thing to postpone to the budget hearings. So we can talk about it on this Monday. So you can choose to send it to a certain time. Now, we already talked about limiting or extending the limits of debate, and we talked about setting it for the public. You'll have 3 minutes. Been a long debate between myself and one of the city attorneys as to whether or not you, whether in council or committees, can impose limitations upon yourselves. And the answer is yes. There are cities, villages, and townships in this state that have imposed limitations upon their members in a variety of ways. Some have no council member, and as I say, I'm saying council member, but I do mean any board member, can speak more than 3 minutes at a time. Usually you do 5 minutes, 5 minutes at a time. This requires a 2/3 vote of the rest of the body. No one may speak a second time on a motion. This is another one that some bodies have. Anything that you can think of, any limitation like that, requires a 2/3 vote. Now you might say to yourself, why would a city council, by a 2/3 vote, which assuming they have 7 people, why would 5 of them choose to have a limitation of only speaking 5 minutes on the issue?
You'll do that, speak for 5 minutes.
Because the other 2 people are talking, because Fred talks too much. So as long as 2/3 of the group agrees, you can impose any reasonable limitation with the concern, as always before, that it's fair to everybody. Yes?
So is this, this would happen to a particular motion, or is this a general limitation that's put on a meeting, or where does that happen?
The ones I'm familiar with, they've actually put it in council rules, and it is true all the time. And they've had, the communities that have been talking to them are quite pleased with them. I don't know any community that's changed it during the time before the next election. You know, when council rules are always up for review. So it's a tool that allows some communities to feel that they're making better progress.
Is that a form of censure then? How far can you go with censure?
You know, you can vote to censure anybody anytime you want. But what does it mean?
They don't represent the lieutenant council, or they don't speak to council, or they
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly say that, but the fact is that as council members, we have very little say on the activities of other council members. That's why I said in the case of the person who abstains, who doesn't abstain when they think they should, you can speak to the person, you can even mention it at a council meeting, but you have no power. Council members cannot remove each other. The citizens elected them, the citizens do that. So, I know I've had this recently with a question about, actually it was a university issue, and voting to censure a dean. And they wanted to know, what did that mean? Actually, it doesn't really mean anything, except it points out perhaps to the administration that the faculty of that particular college are not satisfied with that dean. But whether or not that's a legitimate complaint, you don't know unless you investigate.
Is it perfectly acceptable, so you're just talking about limiting debate as a general rule, but let's say you've been talking about a main motion for 15 minutes and enough is enough, someone can move to limit debate, they just need the 2/3.
Yes, we'll come right up to that. That's the next one up.
Oh.
Very good, very good. Now, this one is a kind of a general limit debate. In the nonprofit, some organizations, last night, we had a rule that each proposed bylaw amendment would only be discussed for 15 minutes unless a member moved to extend debate. Never came to that, but that's not an uncommon rule. But again, that's in the nonprofit world. In the world of government, we can kind of set a rule, but we can't really make the public stop talking if we allow the public to speak if it's a public hearing.
I've heard to ask the chairman to call the question. Is that a way to?
Yes, and that's right next up. Look at that previous question. When I'm in charge,
Oh, okay.
it'll be called stop debate. Because I think previous question sounds like you're going to vote on whether or not you want the sign. Whereas I want it to say stop debate. So look at it. It requires just a second. It's not amendable. It's not debatable. But what does it require? So the general rule is any one time you take away someone's rights, it takes 2/3. That's why the consent calendar takes a 2/3 vote. Because you're saying to everybody, we're not going to talk about it. But our option is we're going to let you take anything off the consent calendar that you want to talk about. So, and the remaining things we're going to adopt by a 2/3 vote because that's our agreement not to talk about them. So that's Now, sometimes you'll hear somebody say, question, that's common. But the fact is, you have to go ahead and take the vote. The error that's made on this is sometimes someone will call out question, and somebody else will say, oh, the question has been called, now we have to vote on the sign. They don't take the step that says, we need to vote on whether or not we want to stop debate, and that requires a 2/3 vote. By the way, this motion hardly ever loses. People are usually ready to stop debate. They're fed up, especially in a large group, and especially if they have a talking Fred. So this motion usually passes. So that's previous question, to stop debate. And then we discussed lay on the table. Going up for one more, the one that has what you might call kind of an archaic name, call for the orders of the day. I mentioned earlier that there's something that we in local government do better than anyone else, which is get off the topic. Now, you don't have to call it call for the orders of the day, but that is what this is. This says we should get back to the agenda. We should get back to the motion on the floor. We should get back to the report we're discussing. And look what you can do. It has an eye. So you can interrupt the person speaking. I generally say don't do that. Wait till the person pauses for a breath and then say, by the way, that's not what the motion is. So this is, and I like this because I think that's the kind of a time where a person can be a very helpful member of a body by saying, that's one of the things you can do is stop discussion when it's gotten way far afield. The other person that I think is a very helpful member says, may I just summarize? I think we're hearing 3 different points. And just say them, and that can also bring the group back to discussion.
Do you have to go through the chair to interrupt?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have to be recognized.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah. Madam Chair, this is unlike division where you don't have to be recognized.
And can the chair also do this?
Definitely. Definitely. The difficulty is sometimes, speaking for myself, sometimes when I'm chairing, I become as engaged in the conversation as everybody else and don't realize how far afield we got. So I'm always grateful for somebody who points it out. But yes, the chair can certainly say, I think we've gotten too far from the topic. Will you please get back to the motion on the floor, or the report at hand. And another one interrupts right above that. Raise a question of privilege. I rise to a question of privilege. The chair would say, state your question. I can't hear. It's too hot, too cold. And you see it has a little cross after it. That means the chair decides. Just like call for the orders of the day, when they call for the orders of the day, a call for the chair says, we need to get back to where the motion is. And here, the chair would say, would everyone please be quiet so the person can hear? Or someone contact the custodian for the temperature, whatever's appropriate. But that's a question of privilege. And then, of course, there's recess and adjourn. On the other side, one you don't need to use in municipal government, what I will tell you about is appeal the chair's decision. When you're in a meeting and the chair has taken a procedural decision that you don't agree with, you can appeal the decision of the chair. Madam Chairman, that motion wasn't seconded. I rise to a point of parliamentary inquiry, that motion wasn't seconded. And the chair says, well, actually, that motion came from a committee, and motions from a committee do not require a second. Person doesn't agree. I appeal from the decision of the chair. Of course, in this case, I have the book, so they shouldn't appeal the decision of the chair. But anyway, that's how it goes. And then the chair says, the decision of the chair has been appealed. Each person, and the chair explains why, in this case, she said what she said, cites the reference. Each person may speak one time. And then the chair gets to have the last word and explain again why she did what she did. And then shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Takes a majority vote. That's the kind of thing I recommend that people do when they're in the meeting, instead of when they're in the parking lot, kicking the tires and complaining about what the chair did. Because it's right in here, it's clear how to do it, and that's what should be done. I think we're not likely to need, maybe division of the question you could use, but since you use prepared motions, not too much. That's when somebody makes, I move that we buy a fire engine and a copier. In other words, they put into one sentence two things that could easily stand alone. And somebody simply say, I move we divide the question so that it is, I move we buy a copier and I move we buy a fire engine. And you can only do it when the things could stand alone. But of course, that's a typical Lansing thing. That's what we call when they load things onto bills, because they know it's got a yes vote and they want to put things with it. So that's where it comes. You heard me use a point of parliamentary inquiry, which interrupts. And then there's point of order. And that's when something unruly has happened. Hopefully you'll never have it, but it's when if a member of the public came in and said negative things about a member of an appointed board or a member of the council. It would be appropriate to call a point of order. That's inappropriate. And the person who's being besmirched can say it, or the chair can say it. And I think that's probably takes us down to motions that bring a question again before the assembly. And I call these the Tuesday morning motions, because this is the answer to those people who call and say, you won't believe what we did last night. Now, there's tape from the table, which we've used to take from the table now that the congressman is gone. Rescind or amend something previously adopted. Word on minutes. At the request of an organization, I did an organization that both uses Robert's rules and has to adhere to the Open Meetings Act. And the question they put before me was, how do the two fit? How does what Robert says should be in minutes fit with what the Open Meetings Act requires? And the answer is exactly perfectly, except for one small thing. They match completely, except for the fact that in our nonprofits, if we discover we're the Green Trees Garden Club, and we discover that actually in 1970 it was Mrs. Smith who planted the garden, not Mrs. Green, we can amend those minutes in a nonprofit. In a publicly elected body, once the minutes are approved, that's it. And so I asked a long-term city clerk, what do you do when you actually do find an error? She said, well, you can't amend them, but you can go back to the original document and write in the margin, please see such and such. So you can't correct them, but you should make a notation that they are not the same. But other than that, the two things fit perfectly together. Because the Open Meetings Act only requires what was done, not what was said.
Should you date the note?
Yes, yes.
And initial everything.
Yeah, initial and date, just as you would anything else. So that's a helpful thing to know. And of course, shredding the closed meeting minutes is an important step that some bodies forget to do. But it's very clear in the Open Meetings Act, a year and a day from the date on which you approved going into the closed meeting is when you shred the documents. So, and closed meeting minutes, somebody asked me about, somebody was trying to approve closed meeting minutes in the open meeting. They would pass them out and then collect them and shred them. And of course, I said, if the only way to approve closed meeting minutes is to have another closed meeting for the purpose of approving the closed meeting minutes. And then, of course, if you took minutes in that meeting, you'd have to have a meeting to approve the closed meeting minutes of the minute. Because all closed meeting minutes should say is who was there, when you started, the topic, and when it ended. If there was an assignment, you remember, because we can't take any votes. So there's nothing to write down. If, let's assume it was, and remember the minutes should always show closed meeting was held for the purposes of union negotiations. And let's assume that's what it was for. The union attorney was there, and the council said, let's see if we can get away with 1%. Just go to the attorney, please negotiate that. That could be in there. That's a negotiation. But more than that, it's not required. So really, there's nothing in open meeting, closed meeting minutes to distribute or approve. And then they should just be shredded when the time comes. And of course, closed meetings, the confidentiality is key. Closed meetings. You can't say anything about what happened in a closed meeting to anyone else. And well, a city attorney told me this story. They kept having what was going to be, the agenda would go out on Friday at noon, and in the Sunday paper, the Sunday local paper, it always talked about what the issue was going to be that was on the closed meeting. And they could not find the leak. And this would happen, they didn't have closed meetings every week, but periodically over the course of a year, they saw this pattern. So the city attorney and the city manager got together and they prepared 7 different scenarios for the next closed meeting. And just waited to see which one made the Sunday paper. Nailed it. So remember how important it is to maintain the sanctity of a closed meeting. The reason I mentioned that about the minutes is rescind or amend something previously adopted is what you would do in a nonprofit to change the minutes, but we can't do that, so we don't care about that. Then, the bottom one is reconsider. Well, if you do not have a rule that allows you to reconsider at a later date, that I could find on your website. So you can only reconsider in the same meeting or the next day. Well, we can't meet the next day because we wouldn't have it posted. So you can only reconsider in the same meeting. And it has to be made by the person who voted on the prevailing side. That's the only one who can make a motion to reconsider. Prevailing then could be winning or could be losing, depending on how. And the issue is it can only be done on the same day because otherwise you could always be rethinking what you did and it would make it very difficult to enact issues. Different bodies some bodies have rules that you can reconsider at the end of the next regular meeting. Detroit has a 5-day rule. You can reconsider anything within 5 days. So there are some bodies that have extended it. But for the most part, everybody just does it same day. So what's an example of that? A motion was on the table, was made, it's noticed and everything, for placement of a stop sign. And the person from the Traffic Improvement Association did not arrive at the meeting in time for the agenda item. The council debated it and decided to place the stop sign by a 6-1 vote. Then he arrived, and this is a real story, then he arrived. He said he was stuck in traffic. I like that part. But he arrived and he said, no, that location does not have the warrants sufficient to place a stop sign. That's going to cause you trouble. This is in the same meeting. We'd already adopted it, 6-1. Perfect opportunity for one of those 6 people who voted on the prevailing side to say, I voted on the prevailing side, I move to reconsider my vote, the vote. So, and as you see, look at reconsider. It requires a second. It's debatable according to whether or not you should reconsider, not the original discussion, but whether or not you should reconsider requires a majority vote. So we did move to reconsider, and so the motion pops up before you as if you had not voted on it. In other words, deciding to reconsider doesn't change your mind. It just brings the motion back. So there it was again before us to place the stop sign, and this time it was defeated 1-6. So that's a good example of what reconsider is for. It's to change your minds in the same meeting. Now, if it's after that, we go to rescind. See rescind? It's right there, right before amend something previously adopted. We can rescind anything on which action has not been taken. Or if we can adjust to what's been done. And what I mean by that is a community in the UP voted to put in, allow a paving contract. And community went nuts when they discovered what they were going to pave over. So they called and said, "What, we've got to undo this. What can we do?" But I said, "We signed the contract." Yes. Does the contract have a penalty clause for cancellation? Yes. I said, then you have a perfect opportunity. And the motion was, I move to rescind the contract with the ABC Paving Company and pay the cancellation penalty as included in the contract. So there's a situation where they were able to rescind because they had a way out. So that's always important. To rescind, you can't rescind something that final action has been taken. So if you signed contracts, you have to find a way out. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, what burning issue haven't we touched? Are you all awake? Are your minds just fried? Yes?
So if people want to just discuss something, they don't want to take action, you can just make a motion to discuss X topic?
That's a very useful question. Because, for example, the Wayne faculty, I'm the parliamentarian for the Wayne faculty, because we don't teach parliamentary procedure in law school, and I'm not a lawyer, just a parliamentarian. They have a rule in the faculty bylaws, nothing can be discussed without a motion on the floor. Because they don't want to spend time in idle chat. So it is perfectly allowable for a motion that is, I move that we discuss the curriculum for first-year law students. Requires a second. And it's not debated, because that wouldn't be useful. All those in favor of discussing this topic, say aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and we will discuss it. In other words, the group, as the majority agree, yes, we're going to spend time on this. If the motion is a no, it failed. So I think that's a very good rule. I wish more organizations would take the time to have a motion to discuss, because a lot of nonprofits don't have much going on and are just spending a lot of time. A very recent caller said, we really need help with our group because nothing's going on. And I said, well, let me see if I can help you. Send me a couple of your recent minutes. And there was a long pause on the phone, and then she said, minutes? So I knew this wasn't going to be easy. So she did produce 2 sets of minutes. And I said to her, there are no motions in your minutes. She said, oh, we operate by consensus. And I, of course, said, how's that going for you? I mean, because if you operate by consensus, you never actually vote to decide what to do. And I asked her about what the meetings were like, and she said, well, we talk about a lot of stuff. And so they need a motion to discuss, to decide what it is that they want to talk about. I saw another set of minutes where I said to the person who's not a city clerk, I said, your group is wonderful, because I looked at your minutes for 6 months, and you have no votes where people defeated the motion. Oh, she said, I don't put those in. So, lots of answers on that. But, and it goes, so I approve very much in nonprofits of a motion to discuss, or even in the municipal body, if you're having a study session, you should agree in advance. I move we have a study session on X topic, and make sure that people want to talk about it.
So if you make a motion, second, and then it's open for discussion, and then someone gets on a tangent, you can, as chair, you can say, cut them off and just say, interrupt, and then say that the motion on the floor is this.
Yes.
In a time where you're saying you're off topic.
Exactly. That's exactly what you said, as you're off topic. And very often, that's helpful because there are people who come to the meeting with their own agenda.
Right.
Other questions? Yes.
On the typical meeting calendar here, I didn't see a section where they would adopt an agenda or set.
Thank you so much. I meant to comment on that because I noticed that you do adopt your agenda. It's local practice. Roberts would say no, but lots of groups do. The intention of adopting agenda is for a convention or a multi-meeting meeting. So that if we all go to the Green Trees Garden Festival National Convention, and it runs Thursday to Sunday, and we adopt the agenda that says the elections are on Saturday, and we know that Linda's running for president, we know when on Saturday to be there to vote. So that's what adopting the agenda does. It cements in when things happen. When you're only having a meeting for 2 hours or 3 hours, adopting the agenda is not necessary. However, lots of groups like to do it, but it is not an official Roberts thing. And if you do decide to adopt the agenda, you have to decide how you're going to do it, because the agenda is presented for your adoption. Does anyone wish to add or strike anything? Is that going to be an amendment? Because then you're going to have to vote on it. Or are you simply going to agree that any addition or striking is allowed? I mean, I think you need to decide, since you're making up your own rule of what you're going to do here. I have seen it operate both ways. I have seen it operate in a situation where there's somebody who always wants to add their particular agenda items, and I don't just mean on the agenda, but their particular issues, and it got to be a sore point. So they did institute, because Robert says adding on the agenda is in effect a request, and a request requires a majority vote. So when the person would say, I'd like to add X to the agenda, the chair would say, thank you. Is there a second? Moved and seconded to add X to the agenda. All those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. I'm sorry. No, the answer is no. The challenge with adding things to an agenda in a public body is to be careful not to add anything that you should have told the public you were going to talk about. A good rule of thumb is to not add anything on which you will make a final decision.
So the additions that we tend to get to our agendas tend to fall under the discussion category. And so that's okay.
Yes, that's very good. And, or additions of something that's come up of an emergency nature, where the public wouldn't be notified anyway. But generally speaking, it's just kind of a good rule of thumb. If you're in local government, don't add anything to the agenda that you're going to make a final decision. That's how that area got paved under the UP. That was not on the agenda. Somebody had an idea during council member comments, and it morphed. So you have to be careful of that. But yeah.
What about rules for calling for an agenda?
Well, generally speaking, agenda items are, what do they do, by Thursday at noon or?
Well, we always have ours ready by Thursday afternoon.
Yeah. There's usually a time set by which you have to have items ready for the agenda. And that's, notice is sent out in advance, in nonprofits on email. The meeting is such and such a date and time. All agenda items must be submitted by 5 days in advance, noon on such and such a day. And then if somebody wants to add, then you come back to the issue. Now you have your agenda. Even if you don't adopt it, what if somebody wants to add something? Are you going to say, just as a courtesy, anything that's suggested you'll add? Or are you going to be in a situation where you need to vote on what's going to be added? And again, that's a function of the group. Most nonprofits simply say, fine. Okay, but if you get somebody who's got a particular axe to grind, you sometimes need to have a limitation. But if you do have the amendment, you really have to vote on the amendment. If you're going to amend it, you need to vote on the amendment. That was a good one, because I meant to comment on that. I noticed in your minutes that you adopt your agenda.
We have citizen comments at the beginning and at the end. And the ones at the beginning are for we items that are on the agenda. Is that normal?
Yes, and that's another survey that I took last year with about 100 MML people in the room. And I gave the 3 scenarios. What you do in the beginning for items on the agenda, and then at the end for items not on the agenda. The second one is for anything at the beginning. And the third one is nothing at the beginning, but comment on every item as you move forward, and then items not on the agenda at the end. And what is so interesting to me, in my more than 20 years as parliamentarian for MML, the third one is the one that's growing consistently, taking discussion on each item on the agenda as you go, and then items not on the agenda at the end. So kind of like holding a public hearing, not really a public hearing, but like holding a public hearing on each item as you move through.
Sounds like a 1 a.m.
No, it's quick. It's quicker. It's quicker because the people get, when you get to the item on the agenda, you hear the report, you hear council comments, and then you know whether you want to talk about it. Whereas another way, you're kind of guessing at what might be going to be said. But the school board model is all is discussion in the beginning. And I think I just see a little move away from that. But it's interesting. But all of them are correct. There's only one requirement. You have to have public comment someplace on the agenda. You have to ask for it. Other than that, you can arrange it any way that you wish. Many communities have had to go to what you have when they first went on TV, because people discovered they could get up in the beginning of the meeting and just talk about anything they wanted to, and then they could, go home and have it taped and watch themselves on TV. So they moved general comments to the end, because mostly people didn't want to stay till the end of the meeting. But people arrange their meetings in all different kinds of ways. A community near me, a large community, the mayor asks, okay, here's the agenda. How many people here for this item? How many for this? Oh, this one has the most. So let's start with that one. Well, until you get the hang of this, if you see the agenda posted on the website, you think, well, my item's not till 4. But you get there, and it turned out it was 1. So I do not recommend that, but I thought that was a very unique way of clearing the room of large groups of people. Anything else? Yes?
I've seen the reader.
No, go ahead. No, I'll give it.
I've seen where items are rearranged sometimes because the person didn't have a slide yet.
Yeah. And see, that's another reason for not adopting the agenda. Because theoretically, when that happens, you're supposed to amend it. But if you can but usually we just say if there's no objection, which of course, I should have mentioned that. Look under forms of voting. That's on page 3, this corner. Forms of voting. And the next to bottom one, unanimous consent, is a vote of silent agreement without any objection, which is a really wonderful way to operate. If there is no objection, pause, Seeing none, we will proceed. See, if there's any objection to moving the police chief down on the agenda since he has been on a call, seeing none, it's moved. Perfectly all right. So that's unanimous consent. And again, knowing that here, everybody has to vote, but, so you can use the word unanimous in government. You can't use that in the nonprofit. Because if I ask, is there any objection, and we're at the PTA meeting? Seeing no objection, we will move forward. Somebody is very likely to say to me, you know, I really didn't like it, but it wasn't a big enough issue for me to go forward. So the minutes would not say the issue was unanimously adopted. The issue was adopted without objection. But here, we all have to vote so you know it's unanimous. Okay? Now, yes, Lynn.
Yes, so if you have, if the city council had assigned work to an outside group, not a city group, to make recommendations to the city council, would that group's meetings and agendas also have to be noticed and made public?
You
Because
appointed
they're-
them?
Yeah, you hired.
That's no, well, that's no.
No, not,
There's appoint, hire, or just, you know, if we ask, we send a note to the chamber. This is our plan. Would you please comment on it? We have not appointed the chamber. So we wouldn't have to do anything with their meetings. If we hired a consulting PR firm, please consider the city's master plan and make some recommendations. By the way, nice master plan. We don't have to post them. But if we appoint a citizens group of 5 people, appoint, yes. So it's that zap thing, you know?
Okay, no, this is a well, I'm kidding. The Saline Main Street organization is doing some work
Right.
on the Michigan Avenue Transportation Project.
Right.
So does that?
No, that's like a downtown development authority of some sort. No, they're their own entity, and they will come and report to you in public. Now, if you decided that some of your members were going to be appointed to that group to work with them, now it has to be posted, because you've now turned it into a public body.
But if some of our members already are members of that organization as well, that's not the same.
Yes?
When we are in discussion items on an agenda, and we're talking about, let's go to your park bench, we're just talking about, oh, wouldn't it be a great idea to have some park benches? And then someone on the commission starts talking about something else. I'm sure this never happens, but they go on and on and on about some other topic. But we're within discussion, we're not making a motion, we're not doing anything terribly important there. What do you do to get that person to stop talking about something totally different than what's on your discussion item on your agenda?
Well, one of the ways you can just simply say, I think we should get back to the discussion on the benches, or you could say, I think we left that topic without completing it. Did someone wish to make a motion? Because remember, the chair can always coach and say, you know, the mayor, for example, probably doesn't make motions. But the mayor can say, do I hear a motion too? So that kind of coaching, and if you're chairing a group and they aren't getting to the motion sections quite quickly enough, you should coach them and say, do I hear a motion to do such and such? That's perfectly right. And then the answer has to be that they make the motion. You can't have somebody say, so moved. Because that makes the person taking the minutes crazy. So moved what?
Yes.
And the person taking the minutes should say to the person chairing, would you please ask the person to make the motion? So, but that's two ways to get them back. Either to say, I believe the topic is benches, or we didn't finish that topic. Would you like, someone like to make a motion?
And that's what the chair should do?
And if the chair doesn't do it because they're involved, some member can say, Mr. Chairman, I thought we were talking about benches. Could we get back to that? Anything else? On the first slide, you have my email address. So that didn't come out too big, but I think you can read it. e.seward@wayne.edu. In a couple of weeks, when you're saying, what was it she said about, go ahead and send me an email. I never mind those. I get quite a few of those people who say they want to do that. And as a final thought, so some clerk called me at 7:45. This is a clerk I know. Clerks who call me before 8:30 have been awake a long time. At the meeting the night before, a motion was made, seconded, debated, the whole thing was done correctly, and it was adopted. 20 minutes later, one of the council members said, I seconded that motion and I withdraw my second. And it says in the book, if there's no second, there's no motion. Well, she said the council members all looked at each other and said, that can't be right. But he read the line that said, if there was no second, there was no motion. So they agreed that there had been no motion and it should be taken out of the minutes. And then he did the same thing again before the meeting adjourned to another motion. And she said to me, this can't be right. And I said to her, you should always go with your gut feeling. It isn't right. And that person misused the book. They had the book. He read a few lines in one, not even the whole sentence, a few words in a sentence, and said, and you all believed him. So don't let anybody do the book. So I said to one of the authors, whom I've taught with, I said to him, all the sentences in the book are so long. And he said, that's so people won't use just part of it. And I said, oh, do I have a story for you? So just remember, it's a good book, it's a useful book, but just make motions and vote and put them in nice minutes. Thanks a lot. Oh, do you have evaluations?
They're on the table.
And you want to fill out an evaluation and hand it in because then you get a certificate for tonight.
Right.
Once Katie gets this evaluations back, she'll zap you a certificate.
We promise we'll send you all of the you won't believe what happened last night's stories.
Okay, good. You know,